It started a few weeks ago, though it feels like it's been much longer. Every night, just as the clock strikes midnight, my old radio comes to life. It's a relic from the 60s, something I found in my grandmother's attic. I never thought it would work again, but one evening, out of sheer boredom, I decided to plug it in. The first time I heard it, I thought it was just some strange interference, maybe a late-night broadcast from a distant station. The voice was faint, crackling through layers of static, but there was something distinctly off about it. It didn't sound like any regular radio show. The words were disjointed, nonsensical, yet they held a rhythm, a cadence that was oddly hypnotic. Follow the hollow, beneath the sorrow, where shadows borrow time. At first, I dismissed it as a prank or an overactive imagination, but the broadcast continued every night, always starting at midnight. They were brief, lasting no more than a minute, but they were impossible to ignore. Each night, the message changed slightly, becoming more elaborate, more cryptic. Turn the key, find the tree, where the river meets the sea. I started writing them down, hoping to make sense of them. My notes filled with lines of bizarre instructions, seemingly leading somewhere, though I couldn't decipher where. I even tried recording the broadcasts, but every time I played them back, the tapes were blank, as if the broadcast didn't exist outside of those precise moments. One night, I noticed something even more disturbing. The voice on the radio started to sound familiar. It was subtle at first, just a hint of recognition, but it grew stronger with each broadcast. It was my voice, or at least, it sounded like me, but with a hollow, distant echo, as if it were being spoken from another realm. Beneath the willow, where the dreams are shallow, find the key, and you will follow. The eeriness of it gnawed at me, but I couldn't stop listening. The broadcasts felt like a dark compulsion, drawing me in night after night. Sleep became a rare luxury, overshadowed by the need to hear the next message, to uncover the hidden meaning behind the words. Then, 2 nights ago, something changed. The message was clear, more direct than ever before. Come to the place where the silence breaks. You know the way. And I did. Somehow, I knew exactly where it meant. There's an old abandoned house on the outskirts of town, a place I used to explore as a kid. It had always given me the creeps, but now it seemed like the only logical destination. I don't know why, but I felt compelled to go there, to see if the broadcasts were leading me to something real or if I was just losing my mind. Last night, I grabbed a flashlight and drove out to the house. The night was unusually quiet, the kind of silence that presses against your ears. The house loomed in the darkness, its windows like empty eyes staring back at me. I hesitated at the door, my hand trembling as I reached for the handle. Inside, the air was stale, heavy with dust and decay. I followed the vague memories of my childhood explorations, making my way to the basement. As I descended the creaky wooden steps, the radio in my pocket crackled to life, the voice louder and clearer than ever before. Down below, where the shadows grow, find the truth you seek to know. The basement was pitch black, but I could feel something drawing me towards a corner. I swept the flashlight across the room, and there, beneath a pile of old, rotting blankets, I found it, an ancient, rusted key. As I held the key in my hand, the radio fell silent. The compulsion that had driven me here evaporated, replaced by an overwhelming sense of dread. I don't know what this key opens, or what I'm supposed to do next, but I can feel something watching me, something waiting for me to take the next step. I'm writing this now because I don't know what's going to happen. The broadcasts have stopped, but the silence is even more unsettling. I feel like I've been marked, like I've opened a door to something that can't be closed. If you're reading this, please, be careful. Some mysteries are better left unsolved, and some keys are better left unturned. The last stop. I never believed in ghost stories. They were always just tales told around campfires or written in those cheap paperback horror novels. That was until I stumbled upon an old, disused train station on the outskirts of my hometown. I've always been a bit of an urban explorer, finding abandoned places and documenting them with my camera. On a crisp autumn day, I decided to venture into the derelict outskirts of the city, hoping to discover something intriguing. That's when I found the station, hidden behind overgrown vines and thick underbrush. Its name, barely legible on the rusted sign, was Langdon Station. The air around the station felt unusually cold, and the silence was thick, broken only by the distant hum of the city. I took out my camera and started capturing the eerie beauty of the place. The crumbling walls, shattered windows, and decaying benches. As I moved deeper into the station, I noticed something odd. There were personal belongings scattered around. A worn-out suitcase, a tattered hat, a child's teddy bear. Each item looked like it had been there for years, yet they were eerily intact. I felt a chill run down my spine, but brushed it off as my imagination running wild. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows that made the station even more foreboding. I decided to leave, but as I turned to go, I heard a sound that made my blood run cold, a distant whistle of a train. I looked around, bewildered. The tracks leading into the station were rusted and overgrown. There was no way a train could be running here. Yet, the sound grew louder, accompanied by the faint rumble of wheels on the tracks. Curiosity overpowered my fear, and I moved towards the platform, my heart pounding in my chest. Then I saw it. Emerging from the darkness was an old, steam locomotive, its black exterior glistening in the dim light. It slowed to a stop right in front of me, exhaling steam with a low, mournful hiss. The doors opened with a creak, revealing a dimly lit interior. I should have turned and run, but something compelled me to step inside. The interior was unlike any train I had ever seen. It was luxurious, almost opulent, with plush seats and ornate fixtures, but everything was covered in a thick layer of dust, as if it hadn't been touched in decades. As I walked through the carriage, I felt a strange sensation, like I was being watched. I found an empty seat and sat down, my curiosity now mixed with an overwhelming sense of dread. The train jerked forward, and I watched as the station slowly disappeared into the darkness. I decided to get off at the next stop, but as the minutes passed, I realized there were no other stops. The train kept going, through a dark, seemingly endless tunnel. Panic set in, and I tried to make my way to the front of the train, hoping to find the conductor. But every door I opened led to another empty carriage, each one identical to the last. It felt like I was trapped in some nightmarish loop. I could hear faint whispers, too, like voices carried on the wind, but I couldn't make out what they were saying. Finally, I reached what I thought was the front of the train, but there was no conductor, no controls, just a wall of darkness. Desperate, I turned back, only to find that the carriages had changed. They were no longer empty, but filled with passengers. Their faces were pale, eyes hollow, and they all stared at me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. I stumbled backward, tripping over a suitcase that looked exactly like the one I had seen at the station. My heart raced as I realized the passengers weren't just staring. They were coming closer. Their whispers grew louder, more insistent, and I felt a cold hand on my shoulder. I don't remember much after that. I woke up back at Langdon Station, lying on the cold, hard platform. The train was gone, and the station was as silent as before. I looked around, disoriented, and saw that my camera was still clutched in my hand. I quickly got up and ran, not stopping until I was far from that cursed place. I never went back to Langdon Station, and I never told anyone about what happened. But sometimes, late at night, I can still hear that haunting whistle in the distance. And every now and then, I see news reports about missing people, their belongings found scattered around an old, disused train station. Langdon Station, they say, where ghost trains pass through, and those who board are never seen again. The mirror's reflection. I've always loved antique shops. There's something about the aged, the forgotten, the lost-in-time trinkets that draws me in. So when I stumbled upon an old, dusty mirror in a corner of Mrs. Thompson's curiosity shop, I felt an inexplicable connection. The mirror, encased in a tarnished silver frame adorned with intricate, swirling designs, seemed to whisper secrets of the past. I bought it on the spot. Mrs. Thompson, an elderly woman with a cryptic smile, hesitated before selling it to me. "This mirror," she said softly, "has a history. Be careful with it." I shrugged off her warning, attributing it to the typical spiel antique dealers give to add mystique to their items. I hung the mirror in my bedroom, opposite my bed. During the day, it seemed ordinary enough, reflecting my mundane life back at me. But when night fell, it was a different story. The first night, I awoke to a faint, humming noise. The room was bathed in darkness, save for the moonlight filtering through the curtains. Groggy and disoriented, I glanced at the mirror. My reflection stood there, still and silent, as expected. I dismissed the noise as a product of my tired mind and went back to sleep. The next night, the humming returned, louder this time. I opened my eyes and turned toward the mirror. My heart skipped a beat. My reflection was not lying in bed, but standing by the mirror's edge, staring back at me with hollow eyes. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, and looked again. The reflection mimicked my movements, now lying back in bed. Just a dream, I muttered to myself, though my skin prickled with unease. As the nights went on, the reflection's behavior grew more unnerving. It started moving independently, pacing back and forth, smiling eerily, and sometimes just staring at me with an intensity that chilled my bones. I couldn't sleep. I felt watched, haunted. One night, the reflection's lips moved, mouthing words I couldn't hear. I gathered the courage to approach the mirror, my heart pounding in my chest. "What do you want?" I whispered, feeling foolish for talking to a reflection. It stopped moving and smiled, a sickening, twisted smile that didn't reach its eyes. Then, it stepped back, revealing a shadowy figure standing behind it. I spun around, but my room was empty. I turned back to the mirror. The figure was gone, but my reflection remained, its smile growing wider. Terrified, I draped a sheet over the mirror, hoping to block out whatever malevolent force was tormenting me. But the humming persisted, louder and more insistent each night. The reflection, now shrouded but visible through the sheet, continued its nightly charade. I could see it moving, twisting, and sometimes thrashing against the confines of the mirror, trying to break free. Desperate, I called Mrs. Thompson. She listened quietly as I recounted my ordeal. "The mirror," she said after a long pause, "is cursed. It shows not just your reflection, but your soul's deepest fears and desires. At night, the veil between our world and the mirrors thins, allowing whatever resides within to interact with us. How do I stop it?" I pleaded. "You must confront it," she replied. "Face your fears, or it will consume you." That night, I steeled myself and removed the sheet. The reflection was waiting, its eyes dark and empty. I approached the mirror, my pulse racing. "I'm not afraid of you," I lied. The reflection's smile vanished. It raised a hand, and so did I. Our fingers touched the cold surface of the mirror, and suddenly, a force pulled me in. I found myself on the other side, staring out into my bedroom from within the mirror. The reflection, now my captor, stood where I had been, a cruel grin spreading across its face. It turned and walked away, leaving me trapped, screaming silently behind the glass. Every night since, I've watched helplessly as it lives my life, wearing my face, while I remain a prisoner in the mirror's cold, dark world.